Hi, it's Brian Bennett back with you talking about scenario planning and just going to talk about three of the key ideas of how to do that well and the three kind of big buckets that we need to think through as we're thinking about scenario planning from a ministry standpoint, how to use that as a discernment tool to help prepare our teams, to help identify where we think God is leading us as we look into the future. And the first step is as we're doing a scenario planning and just even facilitating a session with our own teams, or if we're trying to do it personally, is to monitor the trends. And one of the way that God leads is through circumstances. And so if we want to be on point, faithful, contextual, missional people, then we've got to monitor and pay attention to what's happening. And so we want to think about these trends in a really simplistic way that's helpful for us if we're leading our staff or doing it ourselves. And the first one is to think about the top 5 internal factors in our team, in our organization, whatever it is that we lead. So if we lead the women's or the youth or the men's group or whatever ministry we're leading, and for the senior leader of the church, what are the top 5 internal factors? We want to identify those trends. So we're not just looking externally, but we're going to begin internally and ask, what are the factors? Whether it be we've got a lot of staff members getting ready to retire, we've got an unhealthy culture, all of our team members are maxed out. So what are the top 5 internal factors that are going to be influencing our scenario planning as we look forward to the future? The second question, as we're looking just at monitoring trends, is what are the top 5 local key factors? As we look in our local context, and so I would say in our city, in our neighborhoods, and then maybe regionally, creeping up on regionally, what are the top 5 factors that are going to influence our scenario planning? So for example, if there is a high shift in our demographic population changing, that is where we want to pay attention to that, and then to start asking the questions of God, how are you calling us to respond to our changing neighborhood? If there is a demographic shifting financially, if there is up or down, poor or richer, moving in the neighborhood, God, how are you calling us to respond to that? And that's really what we're ultimately doing with scenario planning, is we're identifying what's happening and what seems like it's going to happen. Not that we're predicting the future, we're just identifying trends, and then we're asking the Lord for His guidance and how to respond to it so that we can be faithful and fruitful in our calling. So what are the local shifts and up to the regional 3 to 5 hours away shifts that are taking place? For example, there could be a factory shutting down in your town, and that's a major shift in your town, and that might, or there could be a new one moving, and one of the car companies is opening up a factory in your town, and you've got an influx of people. So how do we minister to them well? How do we connect with them? How will we know who they are? How will they know that we're here to support them? How can we reach out to the business leaders and tell them we want to support their employees coming? All of those kinds of questions come from recognizing that something's changing in our environment. And so you might not even realize that you're doing scenario planning, but like our church, we had a golf course change over to apartment complex, and we just asked questions of how can we meet with them, how can we minister to them, how can we build relationships right next door. We're doing scenario planning. Before the apartment complex ever went in, we recognized that this is likely to happen. We looked at it and said, this is probably going to happen. How can we respond? That's what scenario planning is. The third one, under monitoring trends, is to ask the question, what are the top 5 global factors? So we said, what are the top 5 internal? What are the top 5 local? Now, what are the top 5 global factors that are going to be acting upon our future as a church or as a parachurch ministry? As you think about these global factors, one of the keys is thinking both domestically within the United States or whatever country you're viewing from, but then also thinking around the world. And this is where for us it's easy for us to put our head in the sand until things happen and we're way behind. We get caught off guard. So locally or globally in the United States, what's shifting? Well, right now at this point in history, when you're watching this video, we're in a massive political shift, and there is just a whole lot of change happening on the political out there, and no one's quite sure what the world's going to look like come post elections. No matter who's the candidate, we don't know what the world's going to look like, and so we can make some assumptions. If this person's a candidate, this could be, or this person, but we really don't. This is really a open-handed shift that's taking place because we're not quite sure what's going to happen. But that's going to be a massive change. Whatever happens, it's going to be a significant change as a new president comes in. Around the world, there's technologies that are developing. You've heard me talk in the previous video, if you watched that one, on scenario planning. Translation technology is rapidly developing, and I could quite easily foresee the day where translation is happening at such a rapid pace that those who have invested in streaming technology are going to be able to have a global impact around the world through translation technology as it continues to develop. Mobile technology is shifting. People are giving more through mobile. They're doing more banking there. What does that mean? And these are shifts that already have happened. And that doesn't mean they're integrated in your church, but they are already happening. That wave's already kind of crashing. We want to get to the point where we're recognizing the wave before it crashes. We want to back up and just recognize just the bump in the water that's going to be a wave. And so what are some of those shifts that are coming that could change the landscape or change the way that we interact with others or affect us good or bad? What are some of those shifts? So once we've monitored the trends both internally, locally, and globally, now we're looking to diagnose. So we've identified these things, but what do they mean for us? What does it mean that translation technology is going to speed up and be possible? What do we feel like God's calling us to do or not do in relationship to that kind of technological development? What does it mean for us that it's likely, if you're like most churches, where monthly church participation and worship is diminishing, and that's the new norm? So what does this mean in the way that we communicate? That would be an example of something that's shifting that we need to diagnose and say, okay, what are the implications of this? So some of the questions we need to be asking are, how fast is this change happening? How strongly is it going to affect us? When do we think it's going to affect us? And what do we need to do about it? That was the other one, is what's the current kind of future trajectory of that? So as we seek to diagnose these shifts, there's a few other key thoughts thinking through that. Diagnosing is, what's the current trajectory? If we just take this out right now and nothing, on the landscape shifts fundamentally, what's the current trajectory of this change, of this thing that's happening inside or local or global? As we look to the future, what's our preferred future? So let's just take for instance, if the translation technology develops, what's our preferred future? Well, we want to be streaming to around the world in different languages and furthering missions that way. Or we may not, for whatever reason. We may look and say, if the church attendance is shifting downward to 2.1 times a month or whatever it is, we might look at a preferred future is that we want to have ways of connecting more with people throughout the week. Or we might say we want to change that. We want to change back to 2 times a month or something like that. So, and I'm not advocating either one of those things. I'm just giving examples for the context of how to do scenario planning well. So what's the preferred future? And then as we look at the futures, what's the challenged future? So let's just say it's 2.1. What are going to be some of those challenges? And how do we need to respond to those? If people are only here 2 times out of the month, what does that mean for communication challenges, giving challenges, relationship challenges, new people getting assimilated if there's less, all those kinds of questions? How do we cast vision? All of those types of things. And so how do we need to respond to that is part of the assessing. And then lastly, so we've talked about monitoring, diagnosing, or assessing, and then strategizing. Is, in light of these conversations, how do we want to move forward? In light of these conversations, this is who we believe God is calling us to be and how He's calling us to respond to these changes around us. And that's where we're moving from monitoring, keeping our pulse on the world around us, diagnosing, assessing, to we're going to take action based upon prayerfully, dependently, collaboratively. We believe this is where God is leading us forward. And that's one way we can use scenario planning as we look to the future and seek to discern, use it as a discernment tool. We're not predicting this is the future, but we're saying, hey, here's a trend, here's where it could go. If that happens, God, how would you call us to respond? And just having those conversations helps us prepare today for the mission that God is leading us on tomorrow. Now, of course, some ways, there's some things that God's just not going to prepare us for in His wisdom. He's not going to let us to see it. He's not going to let us get lead time on it so that we can shift. Sometimes we get caught off guard with an opportunity or a challenge, but many times, most of the times, it's a stewardship issue for us to look at current trends that are right in front of us if we'll take the time to see them. And I know from the business of ministry how easy it is to overlook these and how easy it is to have our head down and just keep doing our thing every single day. I've done that and I know that. But I want to encourage us and challenge you and me both to pick our heads up and to look at what's in the water around us so that we can be better positioned to be faithful and fruitful and to be wise stewards of all that God has called us to. I love to hear from you, love to dialogue with you, so reach out if you'd like to go further, if you have questions, if you want to challenge something that wasn't clear or an idea. I'd love to talk further.